Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative for today's webinar. My name is Anne Livingston and I'm the Chair of the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative, and I'm pleased to be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is focusing on new and innovative ways to support drivers, and the topic of today's presentation is: are the drivers failing the system, or is the system failing the drivers? As you would know from previous webinars, today's webinar is facilitated by Global Community Resourcing for the Collaborative. If you've joined us for previous webinars, you'd know that they've been designed from feedback and requests we received through this collaborative. A focus on our webinars is to bring together local, national and international perspectives and development, as well as the deployment of smart assistive technology, particularly in the community care sector. Just a reminder, if you haven't formally registered for the collaborative site, it's accessible to all and free to register. In providing these webinars, that neither community resourcing or the department are promoting or endorsing any particular product, research entity or organisation. The purpose of our webinars is to serve to inform viewers of various smart assistive and enabling technologies currently in development and or in deployment. We welcome questions to today's webinar, and please post them early on the question pane to the right of your screen. We hope to get to all of those questions at the end presentation, so please post your questions early. It's my pleasure today to introduce Jean Corbett, who will introduce a new service called Total Driver. Jean is the Managing Director for Total Driver Australia, and his passion and experience in the training industry is more than 15 years. He is highly regarded as one of the country's leading road safety advocates and regularly features on TV, current affairs programs, radio and print media. He is a former professional driving instructor for Holden, Lexus, Ford and BMW, just to name a few. Welcome to today's webinar, Jean, and I'll hand over the screen to you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I hope you're all well. So I guess today what we're talking about is where the industry is currently going, what's happening with our statistics, why we started Total Driver, and most importantly, how this benefits people within the NDIS, people that have got various challenges when it comes to either getting into driving or trying to get back on the road again after something has gone wrong previously and brought them undone. Now, the statistics for this industry are startling, and they're quite frankly quite scary. It's costing our community roughly $32 billion a year, and it's rising. So for every 25 deaths, there are 700 serious injuries, and this is not just particular to Australia, this is all around the world. They actually have a name for it. It's called the default. It means what happens if we don't do anything. And the core challenge is that we all essentially teach ourselves how to drive. So we all believe that we're fantastic drivers and amazing lovers, and anything that goes wrong, it's always the fault of somebody or something else. So there's a bit of a caption here on the PowerPoint. It's a dog sitting on a couch that he's torn to pieces, and he says, "I've got no idea what's happening. I'm just as surprised as you are." And I'm sure we all know people that have had accidents where they don't actually admit to what they did to create the crash, yet we all create our own crashes every time we hop behind the wheel. It's the most complex activity that we'll ever undertake, but it's the only form of education that allows the student to define the process, that allows the supervisor to be self-appointed based on relationship alone. It has an assessment process that shows a 3,000% increase in failure, and this is all considered the acceptable practice. Now, if this was a business plan, and I'm sure we can all understand business plans, we all like to see the period where we've put our ideas into practice, where we created our plan and then we roll it out into our business, and then we have a corresponding increase in either income, services, employment. There's always a benefit to what we did. But if we had that same gestation period and then we rolled out our great idea and we had an epic failure where it took our business 3 years to recover, we would think that was pretty bad, and we would wrap it up and put it away and hope nobody saw it. And that's what we would It's all defined as passing the driving test. The students define the outcome as passing the test rather than the ability to drive. The day they get their license, we know, statistically they know, it takes them less than 2 hours to work out what rules they believe are relevant and what rules they believe are irrelevant, and file the irrelevant ones metaphorically over the shoulder, which means all of your safe driver campaigns effectively disconnect. And then the schools and the community are affected by the consequence of this. So how do they engage in what is the greatest threat to their students moving forward as accomplished adults? So the problem is we've got the wrong approach, we've got the wrong emphasis, and that's what our statistics are really showing us. Now, what we found, and to give people a bit of an understanding of where I've come from with this, I found myself on quite a unique path that I didn't even know would exist as a career, and wound up going all the way to Formula One with Mercedes-Benz, teaching performance and race driving skills. And I was fortunate to work under a gentleman that spent a number of years with NASA doing research on astronauts and pilots and all sorts of things. And we understood that basically everything that we want to do naturally as a human being is the exact opposite of what we need to do behind the wheel. And that's why people create their own crash. It's like a massive miscommunication, or we're speaking a different language. So if everybody that's sitting down can point something to look at, maybe the face of a clock, and point at it with your right index finger, close your left eye, open it, then close your right eye. You'll notice the target moves compared to where you're putting. It's called the dominant eye effect. What happens behind the wheel of a car is your eyes start to tell you lies. So for every 100 meters you're looking down the road, the vehicle can be up to 3 meters from where you think you're positioning it and aiming for compared to where it's actually going. Then you combine the fact with how the brain deciphers the information. It literally picks and chooses what it thinks it should see based on what it expects to be there. So the boy look that all of us guys are constantly in trouble with, that all of the ladies believe that we're exercising because we're just not paying attention, it's actually biological. Our brains pick and choose what it thinks it should see based on what it expects to be there. And the reason males have more of an issue with it than females is females have more than twice the photoreceptor cells in their eyes than what males do. So they naturally see more with a single glance. They relate all this back to the hunter-gatherer syndrome. Now, where it starts to go wrong is what we change from everything they've done up to this point, everything up to the age of 16 when they first go for the learners. What we've changed is the environment. So the base operating system, muscle memory, or what they call embodied cognitive skills, is designed for our normal environment. It's designed to walk and run. And you put that same person behind the wheel of the car, and what you do is you introduce speed. Now, speed's not a decorative number. It's not every K over is a killer. For some people, the fact that the wheels are rolling is all that it takes. And then everything the brain wants to do is the exact opposite of what this created environment requires to be managed safely. So it's like taking the operating system out of a Mac and putting it into a PC and wondering why it crashes all the time. No pun intended. So it's all defined as passing the test, not actually creating the adaptation of how we're processing the information. Now, on the slide that you can see, there's a dog driving the car. And why this is quite relevant is there was a program in New Zealand that they wanted to home dogs that were about to be put down. And they all believe that dogs are intelligent and they deserve a far better life. So they came up with this idea of promoting the intelligence by teaching the dogs how to drive. And it took them roughly 3 months to do this particular process. And they quite gladly proclaim that the dogs pass the driving test, so therefore the dogs can drive and therefore the dogs are quite intelligent, which is true. But there's no way that you would allow a dog to pick up your daughter on a Friday night and take her out in the town. Now, their version of passing the test with this particular study is that the dog could do a loop of an oval circuit with a person walking beside throwing doggy treats in the window, but they still believed it's defined as passing the driving test. So then you get this particular issue where The student's sole objective is they want to pass the test. The industry aligns itself to the client's objective, which is to pass the test. The supervisors, basically mum and dad, that have never been taught anything that we're discussing, and they're entrusted with helping the student pass the test. And the moment they pass the test, which is a series of slow speed maneuvers in a fairly controlled environment, they then have this epic 3,000% failure in crashes. And what that shows is the approach and the emphasis of passing the test did not apply to the environment or the activity we wanted to do in that open environment of going for a drive. So once we understood all this, what we did was we set about to create a whole new approach to how you look at preparing drivers. And we created a very structured program, and it's all about retraining what we call embodied cognitive skill, which is your brain's natural process for managing threats and hazard information. And the primary goal that we wanted to do was stall the effect of speed, because speed creates apprehension. Apprehension drives your adrenaline. Adrenaline shuts your vision down, and suddenly you've got a compromised window of information, which means every decision the driver makes is compromised, and that is their driving behavior. So driving behavior doesn't have to be any irresponsible person or party. Once we understood how to put this into a timeline, we created a structured program and developed our own operating system in the back end that meant at every step we could generate a live review of assessment. We can show the parents what we've done, how much work we want them to do, and the key things that we need to practice. And each and every step is based on a cumulative learning process, and it's designed to retrain what their brain wants to do with the information, how it wants to process it. So we go into a lot of science, a lot of engineering principles as well, to basically create controlled actions, not uncontrolled overactions. And then the next step that we did after that was we created a whole of community approach that brings the schools and the parents in on the process as well. So not only are now lessons completely and very clearly defined and transparent, which still hasn't happened to this day in the industry as the industry standard, the reporting process includes the parents and the supervising driver. The mentoring program teaches the parents for free everything they need to know, when they need to know it, and how they need to know it, so they're included in this journey of learning to drive. So we're actually defining what supervised and logbook driving, and most importantly, practice, is all about, the same as you would with any sport, with any form of education, with any form of tutoring. There's an old saying, practice is fine. First, you need to know what to practice. And that's where this program gets drastically different. So you can see here the reviews that the system generates. It gives benchmarks at each one of those 10 key steps. It gives a benchmark to the overall KPI of what we measured as proficiency. It's got the ability for the instructor to offer their own individual comments. So instead of the students coming back and saying, we did great, I don't need more lessons, the instructor can communicate directly with the parent. And then it goes into the elements within each module and grades it all in a competency-based format with the key things that the parent needs to know. And that matches up to other information, which is ebooks, which is the theory, such as we go into postural stability, hand-eye coordination, muscle memory, various techniques to put into place, videos, which is a visual reinforcement, and then online support for everyone that's got those questions about what they need to do. And the whole of a community approach is including the schools with 3 specific programs based on the attitudinal, emotional, and psychological development of them as drivers, and a positive, empowered peer group environment. So we change the focus of what good driving is all about. And it's really quite astounding when people start to give their opinions of what they think good driving is about. The change in driver behavior is astounding. For a demographic where there's a 3,000% increase in failure the day they get their license, where more than a third will crash within their first 3 months of driving. We gave Griffith a random sample of 1,000 students. We'd had 1 accident in 3 years. Massive change. And the parents are reporting the students aren't arguing with them in the car anymore. This whole process of going for a drive so that they can get their hours up is now an enjoyable family time. They're doing much more than the basics of going to and from school or to and from sports. They're actually going places, doing things as a family unit again. And the students are really competent, capable young people behind the wheel. It's great to see. And then by default, we got introduced into the rehabilitation sector of driving. So people that had suffered serious injuries, permanent and physical disabilities. Some people had emotional challenges such as anxiety. They were depressed. There was all sorts of things going on. And some people had physical challenges from birth where people didn't believe that they could drive at all. And what we found once we started applying these same techniques to this demographic, we actually had a far superior rate of what we're achieving. In other words, we understood what their brains were doing. We understood the physical limitations, and we worked out techniques to adapt what we're doing to work on their postural stability. We gave them some core strength. We restabilized their body. We taught them how and where to look, because with the challenges they had, the apprehension and the anxiety, as well as a whole host of other emotions, was creating a far more serious consequence than the average person had to start off with. And that meant as we started to run through people through these programs, they came out with such proficiency that you really left with your jaw on the ground in terms of the life skills that they were giving us, the life lessons of what people could do when they simply had the tools to go and do it. So the investment we made in this industry, we've got one of the most equipped vehicles in the Southern Hemisphere. We work with a lot of occupational therapists to help come up with the tools that these drivers will need to be able to adapt their driving based around what their physical, emotional, or mental challenges are. And then the ones that want more support, we can go and include them within our training programs, and they can come out quite capable, confident drivers. And what it really means at the end of the day is it's about changing what the brain wants to do with the information so the person is more calm and rational. It means teaching them to see what's really there, not what they think they should see, so they've got the right information, which changes their decision-making process, and that changes their driving behavior. And it's about, especially in this particular market, going through with the NDIS, it's about giving them the tools to help them understand why things don't feel good, why they're not feeling comfortable, what they need to implement within their driving so they're more secure, they see more, they're more prepared, and we can adjust their driving to take into account their various challenges. And so they're safe. And that's what it should be about. It should be about the fun and the reward for going for a drive, minimizing the risk so we don't become one of those statistics. And unfortunately, the road toll's not dropping, despite the improvements of environment with better roads, with engineering of better cars, better active and passive safety systems. Our road toll's not dropping, it's actually increasing. So the one frontier that has not been touched is the way that we're preparing people as drivers. And there's a student that we've run through that's a classic example of that. He'd gone through the traditional process, was told he was ready. He went for a practice drive the day before the test, didn't see an intersection and didn't see a bus and drove into the path of the bus. 12 months of rehabilitation and convalescing. He died 3 times and they had to bring him back. And he wanted to get started. And again, we found it was everything that was missing in his approach that was what was creating the reasons. So for a person that was in that dire situation, he's been driving for years now, and in his own words, hasn't even taken a speck of paint off his car. So we find all the time we're getting those sort of advocates coming through. And there's a quote here that's a really good one from a person that works in the SES, that he just finished a rescue where one family is getting bad news and the other family will have to live with it together. And he's going to go home and hug his wife and kids and remind his older boys how quickly things go very bad. And he wants everyone to stay safe. And the important thing to remember, as we said right in the beginning, not one of us hops into a car to crash. I haven't met a person yet with that desire. But I've seen people whose natural process, their natural driving behavior based on what they see and the information they've got access to, is so compromised that every driver around them is at risk. And that's why we developed the Total Driver program, because when you understand what's really going on and the process, just like every form of education, just like every specific sport that's got a good coach that gives the qualified outcomes, regardless of all the variables, that's what we need for the most complex activity that we ever undertake, driving. Thanks very much. Open to any questions if people have any.
Thank you very much, Jean. Great presentation. We've had some questions about what underpinning technologies that you've been using on the program.
They've had Dr. Andrew Peterson do his thesis on our core technique that goes beyond what we do, and he found that we had a conclusive change in driver behavior from reactive to proactive. We've had people like Professor Ian Glendon from Griffith University, who's the most foremost published author in applied psychology of driving, state that there's no comparable programs globally. What we found once we'd worked out how to piece this thing together, that there was actually nothing that we could use globally in terms of being able to roll an operating system out to manage the growth of such an opportunity. So we had to develop our own intranet system. We had to develop apps for the driving instructors to basically not only direct them to where they needed to go, but help them structure the learning process, measure each and every step, provide the appropriate comments and reports, and match that up with a suitable mentoring program for each and every stage. And then we had to develop an operating system that managed the administration side of the business, because what people don't realize is that it's not a very cost-effective model. We don't get paid to travel to and from clients. It's the only industry that doesn't do that, which means straight away you halve what you're actually earning. And so suddenly every cent becomes a prisoner. So we developed our own systemized backend where we could automate everything from payments, the administrative side of it, the financial side of it, and the operational side of it, which meant we could start to optimize how things were going. And again, that would create growth. And then we designed apps for both parents and students so they could get their live window to go into the system to see where they're at, what the benchmarks were, what they needed to practice and how they needed to practice, and get tools to help them with the practice. So we've been developing those systems over a number of years. Each time we roll one out, we realize how much more we needed to do or learn. So we go back to the drawing board and we'd make them again.
That's great. We note that you've been doing some work within the NDIS system. You want to talk about what your greatest success and what some of your greatest challenges have been?
It's interesting. I would have to say our greatest success would be a young lad we met by the name of Harry Wheatley. And the challenges that this young bloke has got, not many people would get up and take on life with the zest that he has. And when we were first asked to do an assessment with his OT, my first thought when I saw him is there is no way this young bloke can drive. There's just no way. I didn't think it was possible. So and he's only just got, well, it's not only just got, they're still waiting for approvals to put the systems in his own family car so he can go and practice driving. But without any of that post-lesson support or practice that we would consider essential for every other driver, he's managed to keep pace with the program that we've got in place, which is quite aggressive in its learning and what it achieves and how quickly they go. So he's out there driving with general traffic flow. He's doing high-speed lane changing and merging. He's quite comfortable with all the maneuvers. We've worked with his parents to create special padding on the seats because of how his body physically is. So we've got some balance and stability around him. We've given him special techniques so he can anchor his body and not rely on the spinner knob, which is his only means of connecting with the steering wheel, and we use push-pull and satellite acceleration so he can basically drive and control the car. And this young bloke is the most amazing inspiration I think I've ever seen. Just for, as I said, when I first saw him, I thought, no way, we can't do this. And to see where he is and how he's done it and the tools on where he can go forward. I know they're talking with the NDIS as he goes from the pre-existing system being transferred into the new system. The windows, the opportunities, what this young bloke will achieve is truly astounding. And that's where you need schemes like the NDIS to open up those pathways as soon as possible. So those that want to fly, they've got the tools to fly. They're really, really good. We've got other people that being able to drive again, it basically gets them out of staring at 4 walls. And that in its own creates depression and all sorts of other illness issues. And just having that freedom where they can get out and do something that they remembered doing 10, 15 years ago, the change in their personalities, the change in their body language, the enthusiasm they get for life, it's great to be part of their journey and just be witnessing that transition on how it's happening. So the NDIS, it really is a fantastic tool for giving people access and opportunities where otherwise they would have been shut away.
Thanks, Jean. Our final question, listener John was very interested in your external review of your program, that noting that Griffith and Mackenzie Health Centre have been involved in. Do you have any other plans for research and evidence gathering around your project?
Yes, we do. Our next step with Griffith is a 3-year evidence-based research project out in the field. Now, what we're doing with that is we're setting up 6 territories and 6 different socio-demographic areas, because what we don't want is people coming back saying we only got these results because of a specific attribute to a social group. It's a very big undertaking. Nothing like this has been done anywhere in the world. Now, we know, and the university knows, and the key people around it, that as this progresses through, it will become the first evidence-based approach that shows the whole of community benefit that's achievable by the positive change in driver behavior. In other words, it's not about rules compliance, it's about creating that new operating system so they're in control of the environment that they're creating and helping them understand why we want to do the opposite for what needs to be done. Now, we had another gentleman, Dr. Tom McCaskill, did some modelling on a project proposal for New South Wales. If we only achieved a 25% reduction to the current industry statistics, we would save New South Wales alone $1 billion a year, which is astounding. Now, in that time, their road toll nearly doubled. So they've gone from 20-something billion to $36 billion. So we were getting far better than 25%. And even if you said 75%, then for just changing and structuring a very dysfunctional industry, the economic benefit for everybody is truly astounding. But to get to that step, our next step forward is this 3-year evidence-based approach between control and non-control groups. And that's a massive undertaking. And at this stage, we still don't have funding for that. We've been funding the whole thing internally. So that's why our growth with that has been, or progress has been a bit slow. But that's our next step.
Well, thank you very much, Jean, for your presentation this morning. Some great information there and a great new approach to an existing issue. Thank you very much.
No problems at all. We're happy to answer any questions at any time. So if your listeners would like to get in contact either through you or directly to us, we're happy to assist wherever we can and however we can.
Thank you. And I remind our listeners, if you're not already registered with our collaborative, the details are on your screen now. And we'll be posting this presentation on the collaborative shortly, and you can access and download that. Again, thank you to everyone who's been involved in the construction of today's webinar, including the project team at the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative, and particularly and specifically to our presenter today, Jean Corbett, the Managing Director of Total Driver Australia. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time. Great to meet you.